Welcome to Codex History of Video Games. I'm Mike Coletta,
And I'm Tyler Osby.
and today we're talking about a game series that we both kind of can't believe we haven't covered yet, Kingdom Hearts.
Yeah, this is a series that is very near and dear to my heart as a one of the larger spin-offs of the Final Fantasy franchise. Your boy is playing all these games as much as I can. So I'm a big Kingdom Hearts fan. It's really crazy to me to think we've never done an episode before on this, honestly.
Yeah, we kind of you scoured through to make sure we hadn't done it before, if I remember correctly, because
Yeah.
we wanted to be sure.
I think we've talked about it before, especially during our Final Fantasy stuff, but we've never taken the time to actually do a little bit of a deeper dive on it. So yeah, I wanted to make sure that we covered it properly this time. So let's jump right into it. What is the Kingdom Hearts series? I'm sure many of our listeners are very familiar with the series, but if you're not, here's a quick overview of the series. I think this is really important context because it's a weird one. Okay, so here's the concept. Think about this in your mind. What if Square Enix characters crossed over with Disney characters in an action RPG? That's it. That's the whole premise. That it's just Final Fantasy characters playing with Disney characters mostly from the 90s. That's the premise. It has kind of like a toy box feel to it. You know, like a kid took out all their Final Fantasy action figures and they played alongside all their Disney action figures. And then they made up a few new characters just for their story that look like they fit in with either universe. So they take the charm of Disney movies, mostly the 90s ones, though the series does branch out a little bit further in both directions as it progresses. But it also mixes it with the deep, air quotes, deep storyline of a Final Fantasy game, and then the battle system of an action RPG kind of hack and slash. I say deep on the storyline with air quotes because I feel like even the storyline feels like a kid made it up. Especially the further in that you get. And then sometimes that's fun. And I think there's a certain charm to it, you know? Other times, especially later on in the series, it gets too convoluted and too detailed. Like the kid got caught up in their own world. And now they have all these details and rules that only make sense to that kid. And they don't know how, they're trying to explain it to their parents. And their parents are like, yeah, sure. But like I said, there's a certain charm to it that you just kind of have to roll with it. You know, if you take it too seriously, you can find the plot holes. You can find the things that are. It's a little bit like Metal Gear Solid for me, where it's like, look, if you're looking for reasons to not like the story, you can find them, right? But if you just strap in and just go along for the ride and stop thinking about it, it's fun. I think.
Yeah, you got to have that area of disbelief. You know, just let it happen. It's fine. You know.
Yeah,
It's cool.
especially for these older ones because the first game's 20 years old now. Just go play it with for what it is and not what you think it is or what you want it to be or whatever. Just sort of let it be itself.
So would you describe Kingdom Hearts story like a kid telling you a story where it's and then the dragon came out and then there were dinosaurs and then Woody from Toy Story showed up?
Yes, exactly. That is a really, really good way of explaining it. And then the further and further in they get, the kid stops caring whether or not you're listening, and they just keep going and keep going and keep going, and you're just still there in the room with them as they show you all their Disney toys, and they're and then Cloud showed up and he fought Cerberus from Hercules. Oh man, I love.
You know
these
what's
games.
funny is I feel like crossovers and stuff is a big thing in movies now, but this is 20 years ago. They're doing it in video games, so that's pretty cool.
Yeah. And there are a ton of games in the series, and they get really weird with their naming too. It's again, a kid just picked out these names, right? So it starts off, you got just plain Kingdom Hearts. It's a name that only sort of makes sense once you've gotten into the story, but it's catchy, it's unique. I think it's a good name. It stands out, right? There are only 3 mainline games, I'd say. There's main numbered games. There's Kingdom Hearts 1, 2, and 3. But do not be fooled into thinking that there are only 3 games in the series or that those are the only 3 games that are important to the story, because you could argue that those 3 games are actually not important to the story, and the story is all the other games. So we will eventually dive into each game separately. This is probably going to be a multi-parter, but like I said, the naming gets really weird. One of the games is called 358 Days Over 2. And it's not written out like that. It's written out 358 divided by 2 days, but that's not how you say it. You have to say 358 days over 2.
That's
weird.
weird. That's really weird.
Yeah. So it's the kid wrote it down and they were like, but that's not how you say it though. You have to say it like this. And the adult is like, yeah, okay, sure, cool, man. So whenever you're playing these games or listening to me talk about them, just think about them through the lens of a kid playing with his toys and like making up a story as they go. And it's so fun.
I think that puts that into much better context for me as someone that doesn't know much about this at all.
Yeah. I think that makes it feel better when you get into the later games and you're just going, this doesn't make any sense anymore. But somebody thinks it makes sense. It makes sense in like somebody's brain, but it's not really portrayed very well. But before we lose ourselves in the beautiful mess of the story becomes in the later games, let's talk a little bit about the prehistory of the series. Like, how did it start? What was the inspiration? Does it hold up? I will answer all of these questions and more. But before we jump in, I know you're not super into Kingdom Hearts, Mike, but I want to get a little bit of a baseline here from you. What do you know? How do you perceive the series? What does it mean to you as a person without 20 years of love and nostalgia for the games, but maybe for Disney characters?
I mean, Disney characters are cool. I'm into that. So, what I know of Kingdom Hearts, I know there are Disney characters.
Mm-hmm.
It's like a mix of, I didn't know if it was, is it Final Fantasy or is it something new?
It is sort of a combination of Final Fantasy and something new. So there are a lot of characters from Final Fantasy in the Kingdom Hearts series. The main characters that our story is about, those are all new characters. Like all of the Disney folks
Okay.
for the most part are like side characters, and same with the Final Fantasy characters, but like your main cast of like Sora, Riku, Kairi, which we'll get into. Those are brand new characters that are sort of designed to fit into either world. So you got like Sora has like big spiky hair like a Final Fantasy character, but he also has gigantic clown shoes like a cartoon.
Best of both worlds, if you will.
Exactly, exactly.
The
So,
other thing I know is there are blades that are keys. There are key blades. That's all
hmm
I know. Is there's like yeah, which is a silly weapon, but hey, I love gun blades. Why not key blades? They're both
yeah,
great.
yeah, and it's the keyblades are funny because in the first game there's like one keyblade, like the keyblade, and it's like we're all fighting over the keyblade. And then later on in the series, and even before the series, then there's just keyblades everywhere, just hundreds of them, dozens, thousands, like just so many keyblades. Like power creep is very real in this game. It's like Dragon Ball Z.
I love it. I'm excited to get weird and learn about the zany things in this video game series.
Yeah. So, all right, let's travel back in time a little bit then to the 90s or the late 1900s, as the kids call it these days. Square had a string of Final Fantasy hits, and Disney was just hitting their stride during what some folks would call their animation renaissance. Actually, this is probably towards the end of the animation renaissance, which is generally accepted to have started in about 1989 with The Little Mermaid, and then kind of ends around 1999 with Tarzan. That's not to say there weren't
Man,
good movies after that, but that was a
that's
real time period just full of bangers.
that's like the first 10 years of my life. That's what's amazing about it. It's just
Yeah.
perfect.
So you
Oh,
got amazing Disney movies in the first 10 years of your life,
those
myself.
big bulky VHS tapes with those big plastic cases, they're the
Yep.
best.
Oh man, I can still smell them.
Yeah, you can. You really can. It smells like Blockbuster.
Smells like Blockbuster, smells like plastic, smells like childhood. Um, so yeah, that again, that's not to say there were no more good movies after Tarzan, but like that's sort of like the time period in which the Renaissance is generally described. And this isn't Codex history of Disney, so I'm not going to go too deep on that. But I do think it's helpful to understand the context and the culture of the time in which this game was first being built and released.
And that context is Disney is on fire at this
Yeah,
point.
really, just no bad days, right? Just everything in the '90s is basically just hit after hit for Disney. And looking back, those are my favorites too. And I don't, I like for a while I used to think like, oh well, of course they're my favorites because I was a kid when they came out and I was growing up with them. But I do think there is a distinct lack of quality in like the '70s and '80s, um, in Disney stuff. Like I don't know if they tried to cut costs or what, but it it
Yeah, that
definitely
was kind
doesn't
of, I
feel.
watched a video recently about how this was kind of, that was kind of a weird time for animation. You know what I mean? In general, like the 70s and 80s were just, it just wasn't hitting as hard as it had before or after.
Yeah, I think the like probably production on animation got really high, like cost wise, and so they were probably trying to find ways to cut back on those costs. And I think maybe quality suffered. I don't know. I this again not Codex history of Disney or animation, but um, I do think there is value in understanding the context there.
Definitely.
So Square was huge in the '90s, also with Final Fantasy. So they just come off a run of amazing Final Fantasy games. 7 was obviously a mega hit. 8 was a good follow up. 9 people loved, even if it was maybe not quite as successful sales wise. I actually don't know sales wise, but 7, 8, 9 people generally like those games, and that was like the late '90s for Disney, so or for Square. So Square, top of its game. Disney, top of its game. But the genesis of Kingdom Hearts starts with Shinji Hashimoto and Hironobu Sakaguchi in the 90s. Those are guys from Square. And they were talking about how they wanted to make a game like Super Mario 64. So in the 90s, Mario 64 was still pretty new. It came out in late 1996 on the Nintendo 64, at least in North America. And it was a total revolution. Like, it seems obvious now, it seems simple now, but Mario 64 honestly changed the industry just in profound ways. Like the 3D free roaming style. I'm not going to say it was the first game to do that, but it was definitely the first game to perfect it and make it feel really, really good. And it sort of was like, oh, this is the future of games. Like, if you went from playing Super Mario World into Super Mario 64, you were like, oh, shoot, this is a big deal, right? Um, but they thought that like the biggest reason for Mario 64's success was because Mario was such a well-known character. And in those days, and still today, I think too, but Mario was actually known by more kids than even Mickey Mouse. So the two thought that maybe Disney was the only company with characters that could rival Mario. If they wanted to make this 3D open free roaming game, they needed good characters. And they felt like, I guess, they didn't have any for this style of game. So they were like, but you know who does? Disney does. And they were probably right. So how would they get that done, though? Well, in the late 90s, Hashimoto had a chance meeting with a Disney executive in an elevator because Disney and Square worked in the same building in those days in Japan. So this interaction is a really good example of why you need to have a good elevator pitch. I don't you've heard the term elevator pitch before?
Oh yeah, where
Okay,
where you're like, oh, you're in a surprise moment where you talk to someone and you need to pitch them something. Like,
right,
this is your moment. This is your shot. You only have
exactly.
one chance. Lose yourself.
That's right. And the Eminem song was still a couple years away, so they
Mom
hadn't been told that
spaghetti.
yet. So this is why you need to have a good elevator pitch, because Hashimoto literally found himself in an elevator with an executive at Disney that probably had enough influence to make this happen. And I don't think it's ever really mentioned who that executive was at Disney. So maybe they're, in the grand scheme of things, not all that important. But it's sort of like whenever this story is told online, it's always told from Hashimoto and Sakaguchi's point of view. They're like, we just talked to Disney in an elevator, as if Disney is like a human that could walk into an elevator. Um,
Well, it was Walt Disney, but I don't know if that's not right timing because
he had been
that's
unfrozen.
unfrozen.
Is that a real thing, or is that a conspiracy
I
theory
think
that
it's a
Walt Disney was
conspiracy
frozen?
theory thing. Yeah,
Okay.
it's one of the many things.
I've seen so the this is a side tangent from Kingdom Hearts, but there's a, for those who don't know, there's sort of a childhood rumor or myth or something that Walt Disney had his body frozen when he died, and was, one day they would be able to thaw him out or something and fix whatever
Yeah.
was wrong with him. I don't remember how he died.
Hey, while we're on a side tangent, can I actually do a correction from last episode because I
Yeah.
forgot this? So I got a report back from Matt in Japan on how I did because I might have messed up some names. I noticed in my notes when I was, because I released, I don't know if I should tell this too. I released the whole script for that episode on my Substack. It's there if you
Uh-huh.
want to read it. What I said, that's fun if you want to do that. But I did have a small correction. So I pronounced the Edo period, excuse me, as Edo, which is not correct. It's
Mm,
Edo period. For or Edo, excuse me. No, I'm saying it wrong again. It's Edo period, according to
Edo
Matt.
period.
That period of time that was very like where Japan was like isolated essentially. It's the Edo period, not the Edo period. So that's my correction.
Gotcha. Thank you.
No problem.
So, elevator pitches, you got to have them, because what if you met somebody in an elevator who could make that dream happen for you? Would you be able to explain your dream quickly and concisely before the elevator reaches that person floor? Well, Hashimoto did it. He pitched the idea to that Disney executive, and the rest is history, which is
I
why we're
love that.
covering it on this podcast. Um, so now that they had sort of like the green light to go forward on this, we get to bring in guys like Tetsuya Nomura, who's a character designer at Square for the Final Fantasy games at the time, and he was the lead character designer on Final Fantasy VII, the mega hit Final Fantasy VII. So he persuaded Hashimoto and Sakaguchi to let him direct the whole game, not just be like designing characters and monsters or things like that. He wanted to direct the whole game. So he also served as the character designer for Kingdom Hearts as well. And you can tell kind of what a huge impact this had on Nomura's career, because it seems like everything he's done since then is like just trying to do Kingdom Hearts again. Because you can see his style in like Final Fantasy VII, and of course it's definitely his style, like an anime style. But Kingdom Hearts really like games after Kingdom Hearts all sort of look like Kingdom Hearts. Like The World Ends with You, it looks like Kingdom Hearts.
Ah.
This is like Nomura's sort of his signature, right? So this is where he really perfected that, I think, and it carries over, like I said, into other unrelated Square properties that he's had his hands in as well. So at first, the story for this game was going to be really, really simple. The game had Disney characters, so it would be aimed mainly at children as the primary audience. But Sakaguchi pushed Nomura to make the story deeper and more like a Final Fantasy game, because he truly thought it would be unsuccessful if the story didn't appeal to an older age group. So ironically, the convoluted story that the series has become today is probably one of its biggest flaws, in my opinion. But that first game really, really nailed it. The complexity of the world was deep enough to draw you in, make you ask questions. It wasn't so simple and surface level that like only a kid could get into it. Like there's more there if you're an adult and sort of into it, right? Makes you ask questions. It sort of has some world building around it that makes you know that like, oh, beyond this game, there's more in this world that is going to be fleshed out, for better or for worse. But it wasn't like the first game wasn't too weird. It was a little weird, but it was like weird in an anime way. We're all good with it, right?
Yeah, just
Um,
the right amount of RPG weird, you know?
exactly.
You're
Yeah.
just it's just you and a bunch of Disney characters, and you start fighting pigs or rats, and then by the end you're killing a god, right? That's how it
That's
works.
exactly it. Yes. Yes, that is very true. But once you get beyond that first game, though, all bets are off. Like it gets real weird. Like starting with the second game in the series, and even actually before that, because there's a little mid game for the Game Boy Advance in the series between the first and second game. That game is where it starts to get real weird.
You had a
Some
really
people.
funny tweet about JRPGs recently, by the way.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah,
Uh,
where you talked about eventually you get to like the names of the areas in the end of the RPG.
Oh yeah, where they're all like Lake of Oblivion, and this was at the end of Crisis Core, where I was at like Lake of Oblivion, like Well of Sorrows, like it's all like very existential, like you're going to fight a god probably is
I love
as
it.
you're on your way. Um, so yeah, some people like that like style of storytelling, some people don't. I tend to like it, but I sort of recognize that like it's just insane and like not it's good, but it's also like sort of into itself in a way that's like the person who made this like just got really into their own thing that they were making, you know what I mean? And you're like there for the ride, but like it gets weird enough that you're just like, oh, okay,
I
man.
mean, at this point, I think it's just part of the genre, and people are like, "Yeah, that's what makes a JRPG a JRPG," you know,
Yeah,
which is fine. It's like the same way the horror movie, like you're gonna have a silly, funny death in the beginning of a horror movie, like that kind of like thing with it, you know.
yeah. That's true. So yeah, I tend to like it, and I think I find it very charming. But you if you're looking for a reason to not like it, you can find that reason, and it will be the story probably. Um, so that's kind of sort of how the game got off the ground and first started development. But let's talk about the game itself, the first game. That's really the only one we're going to talk about today, because we're getting into it here. So
I
let's
love
talk
it.
about Kingdom Hearts. We're going to bring up the grime facts.
Oh, here
So
we go. You know, I live for these.
yeah. Developer Square Enix, also published by Square Enix. It was released in March 2002 and in Japan, and then September 2002 in North America on the PlayStation 2. The PS3 remake came out in about 2013, and there's a PS4 remake, I want to say a year or two later, that was really just updating the PS3 remake to run on PS4. And then in 2020, they came out on PC. Now, the PC version is technically the best way to play it, but there is a huge caveat here in that the PC version has always online DRM. It really hampers my ability to be like, yes, you
Oh,
got to play it on PC. It's a
boo.
single player game, and if you're not connected to the internet, it doesn't work.
That's a bunch of hooey.
Yeah, it's a real big bummer. And so like that's the reason that I find it hard to recommend the PC version. But the PC version plays in 4K, 100
Does it
million frames
play
per
through
second,
some
whatever.
sort of like special PC store that makes it online? Like does Square Enix have their own version of like the EA Play Store or something like that?
Uh, they don't, I don't think, but this Kingdom Hearts is sold exclusively on the Epic Games Store. Uh,
Oh,
but that's I don't. I mean, if they put it on Steam, it would probably still have this always online DRM. But
regardless, it's very lame.
yeah, yeah, and I think the reason it has stayed an Epic Games Store exclusive for the last like 3 years is the rumor is that maybe this is confirmed somewhere, but all I could find is like rumors is that Epic Games actually helped Square port these games to PC. They're like, we'll help you do it if you let us have it as an exclusive, because games that came out around the same time, like the Final Fantasy VII remake, those are on Steam now. Even though they were on Epic Games for like a year or two exclusive, but Kingdom Hearts still on Epic Games exclusive on PC. But if you so you can play it on PC if the always online DRM thing doesn't bug you. Otherwise, I say go for the PS3 or actually PS4 version, probably because the PS4 version will work on a PS5. Um,
Oh, nice.
the PS2 versions, they were great back in the day. There's a lot of quality of life stuff, mainly being able to skip cutscenes in the first game. Um, that you really want to be able to do because this game is one of those games where you fight a boss and if you die, it's very hard. If you die on the boss, you have to watch the 10-minute cutscene again and you can't skip it in the first game. So playing the remakes, they've made it so you can skip cutscenes, which is
So
very
definitely
handy.
play the remake. Yeah, that would drive
Yeah,
me crazy.
yeah, and the PS2 version is technically the obviously the worst. It's standard definition. It's not widescreen. It's this, it's you're playing it on a PS2. It's a PS2 game. It was great back in the day. There are better ways to play it now. You could play it on your computer in an emulator, and there are lots of good mods for it to make it widescreen and maybe some frames per second things. You could play it at high resolution, so that's also an option. Of course, buy the game. We don't condone piracy, but emulation is okay as long as you own a copy of the game.
That's right.
So this game sold 6.3 million copies, according to VG charts, plus another 3.4 million if you count the remasters on PS3 and PS4. And I don't think we have sales numbers for how well it's done on PC, but the game is done generally pretty well. The genre or gameplay style is action RPG. It feels very hack and slash. You're going to be pressing the X button like just a lot to just swing your keyblade over and over again. The average time to complete from howlongtobeat.com is 28 and a half hours. I think that sounds about right from my experience. And the
It's longer
Metacritic,
than I thought it would be
yeah,
for an earlier game from 2002.
they're not like full JRPG length. I think like I usually consider like a JRPG's length around 40 or 50 hours if I'm gonna consider it like a full length one. Although I do appreciate games that are shorter than that. Um, so I think Kingdom Hearts is a good length for that because it feels like a journey, right? You want to play long enough that it feels like from start to finish it's been a long journey, but you don't want to put 120 hours in, like unless the game is Persona 5, which is awesome.
That's right. We're all adults. We got things to do. Well, not all of us. Some of us listening are not adults, but that's cool that you enjoy your long games. I can't.
Yeah,
I can't do
yeah,
it.
it's hard. I get bored after a while. That's why it took me like 3 years to beat Persona 5 because I just put it down for 6 months at a time. But
You
I
never
get
saw it coming.
never saw it coming. The Metacritic score for the first game is 85%, which is pretty good. Actually, a little bit lower than I would have expected. I guess maybe the critics didn't like it as much as the Disney fans liked it.
By the way, I pulled it up on the Epic Store because I was curious, and it looks like you can only buy it in like a giant pack with a bunch of Kingdom Hearts games.
Yeah, they sell or they sell four things on the Epic Game Store. They sell for $50, I think. They sell Kingdom Hearts 1 and 2 remix. And those also come with Rechain of Memories and the Birth by Sleep
And
portable games.
358 divided by 2 days.
But yeah, 358 Days Over 2. That actually is just a movie. They just like it's like a 2-hour video of like here's the story in this game we didn't actually play.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh wow.
The game is, as far as I know, actually, I haven't actually played it, but as far as I know, 358 Days Over 2 is like not great. So I think
Ah,
they're sort of they're saving themselves from having to port this mediocre game, and they're saving us from having to play it. They're like, here's the important stuff from the story. Just watch the video.
watch the movie. Don't play the game.
That's right. Just watch the movie. And then they sell Kingdom Hearts 3 separately from that. Oh, they also sell Kingdom Hearts 2.8 Final Chapter Prologue, which is like the funniest name for a game, I think. Final Chapter Prologue is like it's not technically an oxymoron, but it feels like it, where you're just like, wait, is it the prologue or the final chapter? Those seem opposites. But
What's it gonna be?
it's the prologue to the final chapter, which is Kingdom Hearts 3. So it like kind of comes in between. That 2.8 is mainly the 3DS game Dream Drop Distance, which is very important to the storyline. It also has um, like a episode Aqua, which is like it was sort of a preview of gameplay from Kingdom Hearts 3 with one of the characters from Birth by Sleep. And I think there's probably some other stuff in there. I feel like 2.8 was more than just Dream Drop Distance, but I can't remember off the top of my head. And then they also sell Kingdom Hearts 3 and its DLC. That's a separate thing. That game is I think I'm gonna say it came out in 2017, 2018, so it's like a few years old.
But you want to be careful because you, like you said, like these stuff have online only DRM with them. That's kind of
Yeah. Yep. And then the
lame.
last game they sell is Melody of Memory, which is like a rhythm music game that I haven't actually played because it's still $60. And I'm like, I want to play this game, but not for $60.
Yeah, that's a lot.
So I may have to find a physical copy on PS4 or something that's like used or something. But yeah. So anyway, there are lots of ways to play this game. The best way is to play it on PS4 with the 1.5 and 2.5 combined package that has 1 and 2, Birth by Sleep, and Rechain of Memories. And that's a really good value. It's like $50, but that's like 4 full games. That's pretty good value. Best
It is a
value
good
since the Orange
value.
Box.
That's right. Oh, the orange box. I love you so much.
Yep. So let's talk about the gameplay of Kingdom Hearts. It's an action RPG with a lot of hack and slash elements. You play as Sora, a 14-year-old kid who gets access to a weapon called a Keyblade, which is literally, I kid you not, just a giant key. He holds it with 2 hands. It's huge. It's like as tall as he is. Not quite as tall as he is. Probably up to his chin.
You got to have a big sword,
Yeah.
in your JRPG, and in this case, just a giant key. Works.
Just a giant key. Yep. So this and like this feels like almost like a kid who's like parents wouldn't let him play with swords. Like, oh, you can't have swords. That's violent. So he's like, okay, I'll have him fight with this key over here that he found on the floor. It's not technically a sword, Mom.
It's not a sword, Mom.
It's a keyblade. So yeah, and throughout the dozen plus games in this series, you will find yourself fighting again and again with some sort of giant key. And because it's Square and it's an action RPG, you gain experience as you fight things in real time and you level up, gaining stats and abilities to help you on your journey. Most of the fighting is just mashing X to rack up combos with your Keyblade, but it does you have magic also. You've got all the like staple Final Fantasy magic, your fire, Firaga spells, Blizzard, Thunder, Arrow, Gravity. It's all there, and of course Curaga. Those are really important for making sure that you heal yourself in the game. This is the part that sort of gives the combat a little bit of nuance, especially with leveling up and being able to choose, like there's different abilities that you sort of can choose. So like different builds in the game, like that's where it sort of starts to get deeper. And if you play on the easier difficulties, you don't really have to worry about that stuff as much. But if you play on the harder difficulties, you really got to start thinking about what skills you're taking into battle, how you're going to get your MP back, all that kind of stuff, which I think kind of has a cool curve to it of like how difficult this game can be. And that'll come in handy a little bit later when I talk about kind of the legacy of this game, because I think the gameplay is very important there. So as you kill stuff, they drop money, which is spelled MUNNY. They drop health, they drop MP, and you just pick them all up, little bubbles. So yeah, like I said, it's surprisingly deep for how simple it looks on the surface. At the easier difficulties, if you just mash X, you kind of just win against the Heartless, which are the main bad guys. And that's what set everybody off on this whole journey to begin with. So when the Heartless take over the Destiny Islands, which is the home of Sora, Riku, and Kairi, these are 3 brand new characters that look like they could be Disney characters or Final Fantasy characters. Although if I had to pick a direction in which they lean, I think they lean a little bit more Final Fantasy than Disney. So Kairi gets kidnapped for unknown reasons, and it's up to Riku and Sora to save her. Riku and Sora get separated pretty quickly, and Sora gets the Keyblade, and we're not sure why. Somehow he is chosen to be the Keyblade person. And in the first game, that's really all you get. It's just like the Keyblade shows Sora, and you're like, okay, cool. Later on, they do some weird shenanigans where they talk about, like there's whole games about people who had Keyblades before Sora, and sort of sheds light on why he specifically gets the Keyblade. But in the first game, you're just like, he got it. I don't know what to tell you, bud.
You got it.
It's his. Okay. So Sora ends up meeting up. This is all very early in the game, so these aren't like spoilers necessarily. And I don't want to spoil this game because I do think that the storyline is worth playing through. But early on in the game, he meets up with Donald and Goofy from Disney, Donald Duck and Goofy the dog. And they're on a journey to find their lost king, which is, of course, King Mickey Mouse. He's left the castle, and Princess Minnie to put a stop to this heartless invasion that somehow he knows about. He's like Mickey Mouse is not like he's a very knowledgeable person in the ways of whatever all of the BS of the storyline of Kingdom Hearts. Mickey is like he knows everything. He is very knowledgeable on all of the things. So he knows about the Heartless. He knows about Keyblades, all of that stuff. Um, so it
So
turns out
Mickey's not a dummy. He's like he knows the lore.
that's right. He knows the lore. Mickey knows all of the lore in this game.
Good to know. Good to know. Good for
So
Mickey also, because
yeah,
I feel like sometimes the Disney characters get played like they don't know, and it's
yeah,
good that one of
yeah.
them's in the know.
He knows. He knows. So it turns out Heartless are invading all of the worlds, and it's up to Sora, Donald, and Goofy to travel to all the different worlds and seal away the Heartless. So the first game has these worlds, and it's really just nonstop hits of Disney stuff. So the first world you go to is called Traverse Town, which is not a Disney world, but this is where you meet up with a whole bunch of Final Fantasy characters. You got Aerith, who is voiced by Mandy Moore. You've got Yuffie, who's voiced by Christy Carlson Romano. Leon, which is what they call Squall Leonhardt from Final Fantasy VIII. You've got the Final Fantasy VII version of Sid Highwind, and there's probably a few others I'm forgetting too.
Why do they call him Leon and not Squall?
That's a great question, Mike, and I don't think it's ever answered.
Oh,
Yuffie does call him Squall at one point in the first game, like just like sort of offhand, she calls him Squall. Um, and I don't know if he's ever referred to that again, which is kind of weird because Squall and Yuffie are not from the same Final Fantasy game, but they are definitely buddies in this game. Like they've known each other a long time. Is the feeling you get when you first run into them. But I don't know. I guess because his last name is Leonhardt from in Final Fantasy VIII, so they just decided to call him Leon. I don't know. You got your Huey, Dewey, and Louie are there too. They all work in Sid's shop, building gummy ships, I think, or maybe they do something else. I know you've got Chip and
now
Dale; they do gummy ships, absolutely.
are gummy ships actual ships made out of gummy candy? Is that what you're telling me?
Oh yeah, we'll get there.
Nice.
Yeah. So the gummy ships help our heroes travel between worlds. So you've got the other worlds that we have are Wonderland from Alice in Wonderland. You got the Deep Jungle from Tarzan. You've got the Olympus Coliseum from Hercules, and that one's a little different because it's mostly just pure combat challenges. Like you know how lots of JRPGs or action RPGs will have like an arena where you just go to like
Oh
fight
yeah.
stuff. That's what the Olympus Coliseum is. It's an arena. It has some story stuff, but it's mostly like this is where the game's like hard challenges are, including a fight with iconic Final Fantasy boss Sephiroth, which is widely considered to be the hardest battle in this game and one that I have never beaten. Um,
Really?
yeah. Also, Cloud plays a role here too, in kind of the storyline that happens there. So Cloud from Final Fantasy VII hangs out at the Olympus Coliseum. So that's
Does he
cool.
help you?
He does, yeah. But he does it in typical like emo Cloud fashion where he's like reluctantly helping. He does the right thing, but like he doesn't want to, he's because super lame.
Classic
Yeah.
Cloud.
Yeah. He's always flipping up his hair because his hair is real in full Cloud mode. It's real big in the first game. They tone it down a little bit to make in later games to make Cloud match with the style that they take Cloud in for later Final Fantasy VII properties. But that first game, he feels very Final Fantasy VII, giant hair. It's awesome. You've also got Agrabah from Aladdin. You've got Monstro from Pinocchio, Atlantica from The Little Mermaid. You got Halloween Town from The Nightmare Before Christmas, which I always
That's cool.
appreciate. Yeah, it's not quite the same. I know that's technically a Disney movie, but like it's a little bit different. It's like not quite the same. And then you've got Neverland from Peter Pan. You got the 100 Acre Wood from Winnie the Pooh, and then there's one last world called Hollow Bastion, which is Kingdom Hearts world created for Kingdom Hearts. Features the Beast from Beauty and the Beast. He's like a big part of that world in the story that's like later on in the story. So like lots of revelations and things happen there.
Spoiler territory is what the Hollow Bastion is. That's what
That's
you're
right.
telling me.
That's right. That's where all the good stuff happens. So along the way, the trio makes friends, new discoveries about the nature of the Heartless and who's leading them, and ultimately the meaning of friendship and the power of love and all of that. It actually has a very sad ending. The first game's ending is like pretty sad.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I love that the story does a great job of weaving in all these Disney characters kind of with their own stories because you sort of play loose adaptations of the movies, like kind of where it makes sense. Like usually you're dropping into a moment in the movie and like helping Aladdin save Jasmine from Jafar or something like that. Where it's not meant to be like canon, like this is what happened in those movies, but it's just like what if Sora showed up in the middle of Aladdin, right? How would Sora help? So like, again, feels like a kid playing with their toys, right? Like just like shows up in Aladdin's world and helps Aladdin fight Jafar, and then moves on to Tarzan and helps Tarzan fight whatever the bad guy's name is in that movie. I think it's funny.
Yeah, that's funny. I mean, it's I guess it's like they found their framework,
Yeah.
to make it all work.
Yeah. So it's all very anime. The overall storyline, it gets, like I said, it gets pretty convoluted. So if you're not into storylines like that, like this isn't going to be the game that convinces you to like those kinds of storylines. But if you can just sit back and just sort of enjoy the ride, it's going to be fun. In between worlds is always a gummy ship sequence, which, like you asked, Mike, they are ships made of gummies. I guess you get to like build it. There's like a whole construction of how to build gummy ships and like level them up and stuff. But our heroes between worlds will fly a ship through obstacles and shooting enemies and stuff. It's very Star Fox style. Feels just like Star Fox. They're not super great segments. They're fun enough, and you only have to do it the first time you fly to a new world. Although if you're going for that 100%, you're going to be going back and doing it over and over again to try to get 3 stars or whatever. So if, they're okay. They can get a little frustrating later on when you die a lot and you're just like, I just want to move on to the next world.
Like, I just want to go visit Neverland.
I just get me to Neverland is generally what I'm saying when I play this game. One of the things I think that this game did at the time that was fairly novel was, and this is a little bit spoilery, but it has a post-credits scene in the final mix version.
Ooh,
Yeah, the final mix version, which was released in Japan after the North America version, is sort of the uh, like Game of the Year edition is maybe what you like the closest thing you would compare it to today. Like this was sort of before Game of the Year editions were a thing, but it was like an updated version of the game which contained all the changes they'd made for North America and then added a few extra things like just balance changes and stuff and a little bit of extra content. But in the final mix version and the North American version, if you finish the game while completing a bunch of optional side quests like finding all of the Dalmatians and like putting back together Pooh's book in the 100 Acre Woods, you'll gain access to a post-credits scene called Another Side, Another Story, which sets up for Kingdom Hearts 2 and sort of teases what's to come. And it was really, really cool. And I'm sure it's not like the first game to ever do a post-credits scene like that. It was the first time I'd come across anything like this. And in a time where the internet was like not quite as good as it is now for giving you information about games coming in the future, this was all we had. Like for a kid like me, like the only thing that I had to go off of what Kingdom Hearts 2 was going to be was this video.
that's
And I
really
won't
cool that
I
that
won't
was
spoil
like
it, but
the thing, though.
yeah,
That's really great.
it definitely has Sam Jackson shows up at the end to recruit for the Avengers Initiative kind of feel to it. I think, and this was a thing that they would put in every Kingdom Hearts game going forward after that. But
Nice.
Nomura didn't know if Kingdom Hearts would do well enough for a sequel, so like that's why they put this video in of like, well, let's gauge interest because the game came out and it wasn't guaranteed like that they were gonna do a sequel. Um, so this was like gauging interest in another game. So it turns out that there was, in fact, a lot of interest for a second game. Kingdom Hearts sold like hotcakes and gangbusters, and there was
There it
no
is.
way. What?
Oh, I said there it is for hotcakes and gangbusters.
Hotcakes and gangbusters. There was no way Square wasn't going to ride this gravy train straight to Flavor Town. I mixed my metaphors and I got some Guy Fieri in there, but I'm not ashamed
I
of it.
love me some Guy Fieri, and I'm not ashamed of it either. So
Thank you. Thank you.
we got to have Flavor Town in there.
Yeah. So before we get to Kingdom Hearts 2, which came out in 2005. So like 3 years later, which when you're 14 years old, 3 years is an actual eternity. Um, Nowadays, I'm like, oh, it's been 6 years since Breath of the Wild came out. Huh? Yeah, I guess we're due for a sequel by now, huh? But back then, like 3 years between games, unacceptable. That's so long, you
Too
know?
long, even.
Yeah. So before we get to Kingdom Hearts 2, though, we would have to settle for an in between game called Kingdom Hearts Chain of Memories. And this was a game that was made for the Game Boy Advance. And the reason they sort of made this game was because they realized sort of their demographic here was there are a lot of kids playing this game, and kids have Game Boys because parents buy their kids Game Boys
That's
because they don't
right.
want them taking up the TV all the time. Play games on your Game Boy. Um, and to keep them occupied when you're out in public or in the car on a long trip. Um, so yeah, so this game came out on the Game Boy Advance. It's a little bit different. It's sort of hack and slashy. It takes place between the first two games, and it's like has more deck building elements to it. It's real time, but it has a lot of strategy to the deck building stuff. We will cover it in a little bit more detail probably in the next episode. Um, but before we finish up here, I do want to talk about the legacy of the first Kingdom Hearts game because I think it has had a pretty big impact on the industry and on people who play video games. So it got decent review scores back in the day. And I think most gamers who weren't Final Fantasy or Disney fans could agree that the gameplay itself was decent. The story was maybe a little overly complex, but like kind of in a fun way. For me, this was actually the game that made me realize that stories in games could be worthwhile, like good stories and not just like set up for why you're here jumping on Goombas, right? Like up until this point as a kid, I had played a lot of video games and they all had like straightforward stories, right? Mario goes saves the princess or Donkey Kong has to get his bananas back or whatever, right? Like they had a story, but it didn't really matter. And like, that's not really why I was there. Um, I wasn't a Final Fantasy fan at this point. I was probably 13 or 14 when I first played this game. I wasn't yet a Metal Gear Solid fan. And I'm not saying that games with good stories didn't exist before Kingdom Hearts, but this was the one that I played that made me realize, like, oh, shoot, this is a medium you can tell a story in. Um, like, so I really fell in love with the first game. I was like right at the right age for that too, because um, like I played it for a little while after it came out in like 2003 or 2004, before Chain of Memories had come out and before Kingdom Hearts 2 had come out. So at that age, like 13 or 14 for me, like I just played this game with a cool story, but I was also old enough and developed enough to like understand the story. And like, cause if you were a few years younger, you might have played through it, but like not really got the story, right? You would have just been whacking Heartless with your giant key and having a lot of fun with that.
Hmm.
But I was at like the right age for like a good story to sort of resonate with me. Um,
Also, I was a few years older, I think, at this point too, and so I just kind of missed this. You know what I mean?
yeah,
Realistically, I was like, I think you're like 2 or 3 years younger than me, so I was like 17 or 18 at the time, and so I was just like, kind of,
yeah.
I wasn't really playing video games a lot. I was trying to be cool and failing. It was great.
Well, it would have been super easy to skip this too because you would have seen all these Disney characters and you would have been like, "Oh, that's a game for babies."
Exactly. That's like some I was playing Oblivion and stuff or whatever at this
Right.
time.
Yeah. So, yeah, and it came out in 2002. So I guess at the time you were probably 14 then. I played it a couple of years later for me because
Yeah, I
I didn't
mean,
have a PS2.
I also think maybe that time then 2002 I was probably 13 or 14. So maybe I I mean even then for me that might have been too old because I would have, you're a teenager and you're like, I'm a freshman in high school now.
Yeah.
I'm cool. I can't be playing kid stuff, In reality though, the kid stuff's great. It's always
Right.
fun, the
That's
games.
like the
So,
age I stopped playing Pokemon games, even though Ruby and Sapphire were
yeah.
like really good games.
Exactly. Or Mario Kart or like those games you're like, "Oh, this is kid stuff," and everyone's like trying to play like MMORPGs or whatever.
Yeah, yeah. So but it just like it hit. Like it was just the right time for me that it just really hit. I used to scour like online forums back in the day because that's how you got information about things. Like I was trying to find story breakdowns. Got me interested in other games with great stories. That's why I picked up Final Fantasy VII and just like completely devoured it. Fell in love with Metal Gear Solid, like all because Kingdom Hearts. That was like my gateway into the world of video game stories, and I really, really loved that first game.
That's beautiful. That's your personal history. I
Yeah.
love it.
Yeah. I think the game has had a similar effect on other people. I don't think I'm the only person this happened to. Outside of the story that really grabbed me, one thing I've noticed about this game is its ability to get people into gaming that were not previously into gaming. Like the cartoony style and the Disney characters, like make it a really, really great gateway game. If you have somebody who's like, oh, I'm interested in maybe playing some games, but I don't really know where to start, and they like, but they're Disney fans, you can hand them Kingdom Hearts and like the Disney is enough to sort of hook them into getting past um, there's just the parts of playing video games that like we all take for granted, but like using a controller is like you have to learn how to do it, right? Like, um, so like giving this game to somebody who is really into Disney, like that can sort of get them over that initial hump, I think, because they love most of the characters. They just want to play a game that lets them interact with those characters and have fun. But make no mistake, underneath the cute, familiar characters lies actually a pretty deep game. Like this isn't baby's first RPG, right? At least, especially on the higher difficulties. Like you really need to be deliberate about your equipment, strategize for each enemy, especially Sephiroth. That last boss, he's so hard. I've never beaten him. Um, but it does make me want to start a hard mode playthrough soon, or proud mode, I guess they call it, to try to like 100% the game because this game is sort of my white whale in terms of like a game I love to death but never have 100% it or played on the hardest difficulty. So anyway, you can like sort of get somebody into games with this games because if they stick with it and finish it, even on the easier difficulties, it means they've played like a real, I'm saying real with air quotes, a real game. Um, because I don't like gatekeeping what a real game is, but it is definitely like sort of in that realm of like being a little bit more of a hardcore game, right? Um,
Yeah, I mean it's more hardcore than like a mobile game, or a
right.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
exactly. Yeah. So like if they were into that game and they finished it, like they can play their game. They're a gamer now. Like if you finish that game, you're a gamer now, right? So maybe the gaming bug takes hold. You can sort of point them in other directions. And there's a bunch of other Kingdom Hearts games too, so they could move on from that one and like keep playing in this world that they love. So yeah, I really love this series, man. I'm excited to keep going through it. I want to talk about all the games in it because there are a lot of them. There's over a dozen. I think there's 13 games in the series. And it's like making me nostalgic. I just want to play them all over again. I have actually been playing Chain of Memories on my Game Boy, but we'll get to that a little bit later. We'll save Kingdom Hearts Chain of Memories and Kingdom Hearts 2 probably for our next episode. So,
You're
Mike,
getting me all amped right now. Is what you're
yeah,
doing. I'm
what
wondering
you
if I
been
want to play
playing?
these. Oh, I've had a big week. So I beat Dredge. I beat it.
Mm-hmm.
Very fun game. Loved it. Highly recommend if you like upgrading stuff. Feels
I
good that
do.
way.
I like
If you
numbers
like
going up.
Lovecraftian cosmic horror, that
Mm-hmm.
stuff's good too in there. Overall, just eerie vibes. It's a fun game. I recommend Dredge. I also picked up Wargroove again, which is an Advanced Wars like spiritual successor kind of deal,
Uh huh.
made by Chucklefish Games, and they actually I started playing it again because I got I pre-ordered Advanced Wars 1 and 2 Reboot Camp, and that comes in actually in like a couple days, I think. That's when my order comes in.
Oh,
It
nice.
came
That's
out
when it got delayed, didn't it? Because of stuff in Ukraine. Like they were
It
gonna.
did, yeah, and then it came out actually on the 21st, and I pre-ordered it, but I didn't pre-order it in time to get it on the 21st, so my
Ah,
copy comes in on the 25th, which I'm fine with. I'm in no rush, but I'm getting like physical copies of these Switch games I really love, and I love Advanced Wars 1, and I'm super excited to play Advanced Wars 2 for the first time. And I've heard they've made a lot of quality of life changes to make it better as well, so I'm stoked for it.
good.
And then
Oh,
the
that's
other
exciting.
game I'm playing because I was in kind of the mood for a good old fashioned CRPG, and I started it and I never kept going with it, and I picked it up again and now I'm in love with it. Is Divinity Original Sin 2,
That's
which
one
I
I would like to get into.
it is so fun, but also so hard. There's ways to cheese the game, and I'm getting better at combat. In fact, our friend has been watching me play and like helping me out because he's really into the game, so he can like guide me through it. If I'm like,
Nice.
I got stuck on a boss fight, and he's like, "Yeah, you just gotta go do this," and I'm like, "Oh, okay," and then it's like it made more sense. But
Yeah.
I'm really loving it. I'm loving the world too. Like I pre-ordered and played the beta of Baldur's Gate 3, which is made by Larian Studios, who also made Divinity Original Sin 2. And I'm so stoked knowing that I'm learning the Divinity world, which is like very much a D&D inspired fantasy world, and then I get to play in August actual D&D like video game Baldur's Gate 3 in the same style.
Nice.
So that's exciting to me with the D&D 5e rules. But yeah, I'm loving it. What have you been playing?
Well, I've been making some progress on Chain of Memories on my little Miu Mini fake Game Boy. That's been pretty fun. But I haven't spent a ton of time playing that right now. I'm back on the Final Fantasy 14 train. I am making my way through Endwalker right now. I've just finished up the other day all of the in between story stuff from Shadowbringers to Endwalker, and now I'm on Endwalker proper, and I'm through like the first big segment. I just did my first dungeon from Endwalker, and it's real weird, man. This game is great, but I'm so stoked to be back into it. I love playing Red Mage. I love seeing all my friends of the Scions of the Seventh Dawn. I'm back into it, and I have a friend that's like sort of helping me get through a lot of stuff too. Like he plays tank, so when it's time for me to do group content, he can like we can pop the queue quickly with
Nice.
a tank and a healer when we just need one DPS. So yeah,
That's
I'm having a lot
rad.
of fun with that. But that's kind of it because I probably played 9 or 10 hours of that game yesterday. I really went ham on some Final Fantasy 14 to try to make it to that
Dude,
first
I played yeah,
dungeon.
I played like 2 or 3 hours of Divinity yesterday. I was like really into it. I'm just it's weird because I've kind of fallen off Destiny again, but there's no real incentive for me to play it, and there's just so many good games out there. So I don't want to say I'm Like, I'm never gonna be done with Destiny 2, obviously, but I am in a mode where I'm a casual, I'm a filthy casual is what I'm saying. I'm not
Yeah.
gonna grind that game anymore.
I'm getting to the point in that game where like it's like every season it felt like or every expansion it feels like you play for a little while and then you start to do the grind a little bit and it's fun for a little while. Numbers going up is always fun. And then for me, I hit a wall where I sort of see the matrix and I understand like how this is really just a scheme to keep me playing the game rather than like actually enjoying number going up, right? It's like
Yeah.
number go up like the idea with number go up is number go up makes the enemies easier. But the way they're sort of balancing it now is like number go up, enemies don't get easier. And so it's like, what's the point of number go up? And
Yeah,
then once
number
I,
go up unlocks hard content,
right, hard
essentially.
content I've already played
Yeah.
at that difficulty. So it's like, it feels like every season, like the time for me to see the Matrix and like disengage gets shorter and shorter.
Yep, me too. I'm really in it for the story at this point. I just kinda
Yeah.
wanna see how it ends. That's kinda
Yeah.
where I'm at, which is funny because Destiny's never been known for having the most in-depth story, but I wanna know how it ends, essentially.
Yeah, it's. I mean, I like the story from the latest expansion, and I did have a lot of fun in the raid. But yeah, it's like it's gotten to the point where it's like, oh, I'm just gonna end up uh, grinding to play content I've already played at this specific difficulty before. So it's like it's just okay. Every season, we want you to put in X number of hours before you can play the stuff you've already played. And I'm like, I'm not. I got other games that respect my time more than that.
That's right, yeah. See, I get you. Well, I'm glad you're having fun with Final Fantasy 14 again. Next week, I remember mentioning that we were gonna do a mailbag episode next week. I lied because we have a guest, and I'm very excited for it, so we're gonna do that next week. But the week after that, we might do a mailbag. So I'll say if you want to send us some emails, you can do that at codexhistorypodcast@gmail.com, or you can go to codexpodcast.net and send us an email through there. And that's how we'd get the emails to do the mailbag in a couple weeks. But I'm super stoked for our guest next week. It's going to be a real good time. And with that, Tyler, if there's nothing else, I think we're done. Do you want to say bye to everybody today?
Yeah, goodbye to everybody today.